What's that?
What? Oh, the fan of your MacBook.
Yeah, just the brushless thing that's supposed to be super quiet, which
Yeah.
is not particularly. We're telling everybody about the fan problems. Hello, 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 everybody in the universe. Welcome to another episode of Emerald City Technology Conversations. Today, I have with me Jose, and as I always do, I'll let my guests introduce themselves.
Excellent. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Jose Miguel. It's interesting. People always ask me, do you prefer Jose Miguel? What do you prefer? It's like I always tell people you need to be a little bit more specific than Jose, especially if we are like in Southern California or somewhere.
Yeah,
If it's an emergency, yell the full name. But either way, I lived in Seattle for a little bit over 6 years. Originally from Venezuela, moved here from Ecuador, so lived around, and yeah, been working with Linux for over 15 years. Open source advocate, loving it. So thanks for
very
having me.
nice. Yeah, glad to have you here. I was actually trying to figure out you have your flags on your profile
Yeah.
on Twitter, and I guess I could have zoomed them in on something, but I had them. I was looking at them on my phone, and I'm trying to see them. And I'm looking at them; they're so small. I'm like, well, one looks kind of like Venezuela, but it's got the colors of. I couldn't figure out the other one. So Ecuador. That's probably what it is, huh?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
no, the other one's Spain, but
Oh, is it?
Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador share the same colors in the flag.
Yeah.
There's just small differences in like the width of the bars and whether it has stars or
Like
coat of arms and
the
stuff.
emblem. Yeah.
They were all like the same country at some point in the
Yeah.
19th century.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to figure out. I saw the emblem and I couldn't figure out if it was like. Well, now that you say Spain, it makes sense because it is red, and I was trying to figure it out. The shield on one of the other flags.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it because I pulled it up, and somehow I managed on Google to find just the shield, not the flag.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I was looking at that, and I'm like, now I'm
It's-
getting myself more
I know.
confused. But I always go down the rabbit hole with all that stuff because
Yeah.
I'm always trying to.
You ended up in the vexillology Wikipedia article. and all-
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, oh man, this up came on and already said proprietary software is the root of all evil. So that seems like it's almost a basis in which we can start talking about technology this morning.
Yeah.
I sort of mostly agree with that. I think it depends, like a lot of things. So you've been here in the Northwest for a while, working on open source tech, doing a lot of research into Linux, how it's used, things like that. What's some of the biggest key points, happy points, pain points, whatever type of points that you look into in regards to Linux that you find interesting these days?
Well, open source is the root of all good. I think that's what drives me.
Mm-hmm.
Proprietary software needs to be called out. We, at least in Spanish, because free and open, they're the same word or similar words, or there's like free as in free beer, free as in free speech, and all that stuff. We tend to play the word games with this stuff, but
Oh yeah.
open source is the root of all good. And I had this discussion with the good friend Steve Wally on whether the whole industry thinking of supply chain attacks for software has been revamped or redefined by open source. And he has the opinion that nothing really changes with open source. Nothing is inherently secure or insecure with open source, which I kind of agree. But at the same time, just the explosion of people using open source has made everyone just think seriously about the supply chain problem. Before it was kind of easy, right? Like you got a proprietary software outsourcer and a proprietary software ISV, and one's consuming from the other, and the supply chain is like, trust me, here's a contract, right? And that just open source completely changed that.
Yeah.
I'm out the Northwest, and I work at Microsoft, so I didn't have a lot of options in terms of where I can go and continue growing my career, etc. But it was like week 2 of living here that I realized like the Northwest is the place to be for this type of stuff. And this was pre-cloud days.
Hell yeah.
So this was definitely pre-cloud days and pre-Satya days even.
Hmm.
And I was still doing open source at Microsoft, which is kind of odd.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a career limited move. Uh, but
CLM, Microsoft, right? CLM, career limiting maneuver.
yes, a new acronym.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was like the days of, open source means PHP on Windows Server and,
Oh man.
XML parsing Office documents and that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And I do not miss those days,
Yeah.
compared to the stuff that I get to today, which is working a lot with Linux, for example.
I, I feel like I've blocked out some of the PHP on Windows days.
Yes.
Like I just don't even. It's like they don't even really exist anymore.
Do you see the discussion on what is it, P++? Someone was discussing. They were discussing like a new approach to PHP, and yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. PHP 7, promising all this
Hmm.
performance improvements without having to change your code, but I think we've heard that before.
Yeah.
And it's still what, like a third of the internet or something like that is
Hmm.
PHP. So
Largely because of WordPress, right?
WordPress and Drupal,
Yeah, and
Joomla,
Drupal.
and that type of
Yeah.
stuff, Magento, and all of that. But hey, my only development background is Perl.
Hey.
So hey, if you need me to put out some CSV for you, I can do that.
Nice. The next time I see some Perl code, I'm giving you a call.
Yeah.
So I always, I feel like I am mid train wreck when just looking at Perl. I'm like, oh dear, I'm not familiar with this. This is completely, and I've had so many situations where I should have probably just learned Perl and stopped resisting, or stopped. It's not that I resisted; it's just that I dragged along. I'm like, well, I'll just figure it out slowly.
Yeah. I think the main thing for me was I'm a sysadmin. I mean, that's like I'm a Linux person, and Perl
Hmm.
was just there, right? Like
Oh
any
yeah.
Linux distro, you type Perl, you'll have the interpreter there.
Hmm.
Same thing with Python, but I was taught Perl by a very enthusiastic CS professor, and he, the regular expressions and all that stuff. He just made it look like something that was really interesting and really useful and all of that, and that was great. It got me excited. But as soon as I started seeing other people's Perl code, I'm like, well, this is a total mess.
Yeah.
But the main thing was that it was created by is it linguist, and so therefore it's very idiomatic, and it's like you can do stuff like something if condition, and
Hmm.
it just feels like very natural. But I think modern programming languages, there's just a lot to choose in that space.
Yeah.
So
Chris said WordPress is 30%, and Disoc said Zamp and Wamp were days I don't miss.
yeah, was someone I think it was Aaron Whistling was talking about the not the lamp but the slamp or the clamp. Yeah, Kubernetes, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP,
Oh, geez.
and it's like, oh man, that's modernization right there.
Yeah, right. Um, so the clamp lamp, I like that.
Yep.
Was it? There's another one. There's the F sharp community came out with one called Safe, which I thought was pretty
Oh yeah,
funny.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, and it's based on basically F sharp being used completely open source stack, which is kind of interesting.
Yep.
Um, there's another one had a weird name, like Sins or something like I forget what it was, but it's always funny when there's like the 4 letter stack thing. I've always that's kind of cracked me up.
Yep.
Um, so on that note, though, like we got this Kubernetes future happening right now. Um, we have X gazillion distros soon, or not soon. We have that now too. We have like we were talking a little bit before the stream here, and a lot of people out here in the internet land know that I stream. They don't always know everything I stream is on Linux. Like I'm not using any of the Windows OBS packaged fancy things. So like anything that I have going on, the chat in window or whatever, is all OBS, all Linux based OBS on either Ubuntu or Budgie,
Budgie. Yep.
yeah, Budgie, which I love that package right now. And then I did try to I'm completely spacing the free Red Hat version,
Fedora.
Fedora. I started to get a Fedora instance running, but I don't have it running completely yet. So everything I stream is actually on that. Like the meetup last night, I got an XPS 15 running Ubuntu 18.04 on it, streamed OBS, etc. So pretty much 99% of everything I do now is on Linux. And besides the complaint when I bought that XPS 15 from Dell because it didn't have drivers and I had to do a weird hacky thing to get Linux installed on it, besides that complaint, like I generally don't run into issues and don't have any complaints about using Linux on every machine that I have. And honestly, probably run into fewer issues than I had previously in the Mac world or the Windows world even.
Yep.
Um, but I'm curious. So like, what do you see as the next steps in the Linux universe? What are the next steps with like all this container stuff has exploded at this point. It's all over the place, for better or worse. Linux is everything from practically every device on the planet to a bunch of systems and then all the servers.
Yep.
So it's all over the place. What do you see are like the next things it's going to be doing?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, all the servers, all the VMs, all the cloud instances, the
Mm-hmm.
phones, the IoT devices, and a bigger chunk of the desktops than 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I
Oh yeah.
always look at the Stack Overflow data, and it's like 15% of people that
Oh
come
wow,
to
is it
this
that
site, yeah,
high now?
is
Wow.
is developers and pro users or whatever you want to call
Mm-hmm.
that. But to your point, right? Like it has to do a lot with the OEM and just the general experience just working better.
Oh yeah.
I started with Canopix. So Canopix is a German live CD thing back in, again, 15 years ago, and based
Yep.
on Debian Sarge or something like that, which was testing version of Debian back then.
Mm-hmm.
No systemd, none of those things. And I mean, I had, again, back in Latin America, my ISP was really cheap, and they had Win modems,
Oh
USB
yeah.
Win modems, and that stuff, how to run the stuff on Linux was really, really tough.
Yeah.
Um, and now it's like, just to your point, yeah, it's probably, I can probably go to Microsoft Store, get mice that will work faster on a Linux machine than on a Windows machine, and you
Mm-hmm.
plug it in and start moving it, and the other thing will try and download drivers and
Yep.
and all that stuff, right?
That's another thing that actually I've found myself. Morning, Lily. She says hello to you too.
Hello.
Um, I actually have a moment of shock if I plug anything in Linux and it either A doesn't work, which I see jokes about it all the time still. And I'm like,
Yeah,
what distro are you using? What
exactly.
machine you using something from 1998? Because yeah, you'd
Yes.
have problems, but
Yes.
you know, it's like I'm honestly I get a moment of shock and kind of sit there and think like, did I plug it in wrong? Like that's my first response now. Whereas with other things, like you said, like Windows, it starts downloading drivers or doing whatever it's got to do. Uh, Mac will either just sort of work or completely not because you've just bought the wrong thing and they just won't ever support it. Period.
Right.
Um, so it's kind of yeah, I have that shock, and I've always found personally that's a super weird feeling because when I started with Linux too was early Red Hat days, and yeah, everything didn't work then. But now it's just like I plug in the camera here. I plug in that with a capture card,
Yep.
and it detects that stuff. Matter of fact, this machine won't detect that Canon on a capture card. And this happens to be a Mac today.
Hmm.
But on my XPS 15, my XPS 13, my System 76 machine, every camera I've ever used for any of this stuff, plug it in, and it finds it.
Yep.
And usually finds it in the sense that it has the features and like options for you too, which
Yep.
is beautiful. So yeah, that's I feel like we're living in the future of Linux in that regard
Yeah.
because it works with most stuff.
And so that's part of the thing, that we're trying to make the things that worked 10, 15 years ago
Mm-hmm.
work in this new world too. And sometimes it works, sometimes it just doesn't. And you want to take an angle, we can talk about package managers, for example. You have apt and RPM systems that are venerable, and they
Yep.
made, again, open source is the root of all good, in no small part thanks to apt and RPM,
Yeah.
because they made it easy to fetch open source software from repositories, fetch the dependencies, install and upgrade them, and all that type of stuff. So I was magical, but the type of software that was distributed there, was, I don't know, the Postfix or the SendMail
Mm-hmm.
MTAs, or Postgres, or
Right.
lots of utilities, or yeah, maybe some desktop stuff, maybe some games, but it's not the type of stuff we have today. And and the release cadence, that came with that was conservative. In the case of Debian, maybe too conservative, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
taking a we'll ship when it's ready type of stuff.
Right.
And in right now, if you ignore all that past and you just look at the Linux landscape today, you have Flatpaks and Snaps and Nix and NixOS and Gix and GixSD, and then you have things that are like rolling releases like Clear Linux, and things that are rapid predictable releases like Ubuntu has now,
Right.
regular enterprise Linux kind of release cadences. And if you zoom out from package managers, look at like file system layouts. That stuff has changed too. Before, I remember when Debian said, "Don't put your website under var www. You got to put it under srv www." And
Oh,
everyone
right.
was like, "Oh yeah, let's read the standard. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Okay, let's do it that way." But now it's like snaps will try and install everything under wax snap, and
Yeah.
so if you only look at the new stuff, and if you're a Linux sysadmin and a Red Hat sysadmin with a certified certification from Red Hat, living in, I don't know, Milwaukee,
Mm-hmm.
this is scary. I mean, you just don't know like if your skills and experiences will translate into this new world. And some things will change, and some things are, I think, research and experiments and things that are necessary, but that didn't won't necessarily stick.
Right.
um, Another great example that you mentioned Kubernetes is complex applications, right? Like it was really hard, and I don't even know if it was ever done. Like doing apt-get install Drupal, for example.
Mm-hmm.
That would require pulling Apache, pulling the Apache PHP library, pulling the PHP library for MySQL,
Right.
pulling MySQL, pulling the Drupal code, pulling the Drupal SQL, kind of dump, and then
Mm-hmm.
loading that thing and configuring credentials and all that stuff. And that was only for single node installations. If you
Right.
wanted to have like that, split the database and the web servers, then just app wouldn't help you with that type of stuff. And just imagine now like deploying, I don't know, a Cassandra cluster, or Spark, or and actually I think data is a great example of an entire space where there was this open source explosion.
Mm-hmm.
And you know I always try and do this exercise of like, what are proprietary programming languages out there? I mean, .NET is C#. The spec is open source or an open standard.
And it's kind of been that way too.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
right now it's really hard to find something like that. And I think in data is like, well, take SQL, Oracle, and there's some stuff out there for sure, but like
Mm-hmm.
all the new stuff is also open source. Okay, how do we
Yeah.
ship that? How do we ship that on Linux? And I think the package managers, the conventional ones, are like, we kind of don't have an answer. But on the other hand, you just don't want people to go crazy with, I don't know, stuff like CNAV or Helm charts, and then make a statement like, that's how we're going to distribute software from now on.
Right.
No, that's going to coexist. Like you're going to have that. You're going to have Nix to manage your, I don't know, CLIs in your local profile. You're still
Mm-hmm.
going to have apt on RPM. How do you service this thing? Like, how do you upgrade between releases and the type of stuff? That's a very interesting question, because I think it's in this cloud world. Um, we are sold the idea that it is very cheap
Mm-hmm.
to just get rid of everything and start over, because we have it all defined in a Terraform thing, or an Ansible playbook, and therefore we can just tear down the node and create it again. And so the whole concept of service, or like an apt upgrade or a yum update, and moving from release 1 to release 2, doesn't make a lot of sense in for a lot of people that are can just start over.
Mm-hmm.
And Kubernetes gives you that opportunity, right? Like, here's a node. This is an
Yeah.
old node. We'll
Right.
cordon it. We'll drain everything from it. We'll destroy it, and we'll create a new one.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just not the way you did things on Linux 10 or 15 years ago, right? Like, that was like a maintenance window that you had to, set up to shut down a server. You got to bring your ITIL experts to, I don't know, make sure that there was business continuity and all that type of stuff. And all
Right.
I'm saying is that there's people that still operate that way.
Yeah. No, I find it interesting. You mentioned there's definitely there's the situations where you have npm or some tertiary package manager that just says, okay, I'm going to install. It takes its slice of the universe and it installs stuff pertinent to that. But then you have these other scenarios, which I deal with a lot, data stacks, like Apache Cassandra, any distributed database thing or whatever. Kubernetes is a great example too, where uh, I it always kind of makes me chuckle a bit. So like you go to the Apache Cassandra website, and it's completely legit under the instructions that say how to download and install
Yeah.
Cassandra.
Yeah.
It says add this repo,
Yes.
apt-get install Cassandra.
Yep.
It is that easy, except you have one node on that machine.
Yes.
And what you really want, if you're going to run a distributed database,
It's a
is
cluster.
multiple machines with it on all these things. But once you do that, then you have to figure out how to set the config. You have to make sure that that thing points and knows about the other nodes and that they find each other and that it becomes a cluster.
Yes.
You can't do that with apt-get. So what you've done is you've installed a node on that machine. You've prepared it for its future as part of the collective Borg of a Cassandra cluster.
Yes. Good.
So it from that aspect, it's like it completely breaks any notion of being able to do it like npm install, where it's building it in its little world there, and it's not really a system thing like apt-get, even though you can do that one little part with it, but it's much larger. And I guess with Kubernetes, you get like Helm charts or something to do that.
That are cluster aware.
Yeah.
Yes.
And even then, it's still kind of like, I don't know, I feel weird.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different ways to do it, and it's kind of like, are we aware of what we're installing? I don't feel sometimes like the key parts of what we need to know are actually there when we install bigger systems like that.
But here's an idea. So repos, apt and RPM repos, they are really, the implementation side of it is static HTTP server, literally. I mean, take tiny HTTPD, if you will, and a folder that has to conform to certain, pattern and has to have indexes that look in a certain way, but it's really static files. What if those were dynamic in the client that is making the, when you do an apt install Cassandra, you're sending over, here's what I know about my environment. I am a node that's part of this cluster, and of course, here's my authorization key or header or whatever it is. And then what you get back, you still get a deb, but you get a deb that is pre-configured with your settings for your environment or something like that.
Yeah.
You can do things like flighting, for different cadres and of users. You can do things like A/B testing. You can do things like, there's so much you can do if you make the repo dynamic, and without having to change the package format. Because as you were telling me this, I'm switching to my Debian developer kind of mind, and I'm like, well, I kind of know how I would do that, which has to do with, apt has the concept of like a post-in script that is a little script that runs when you install the package. I'm like, okay, well, it's a shell thing. You can do it in any other language, but you start writing some shell there saying, well, if I have a private IP address, if there's an instance metadata server I can query, maybe I can know that I'm running in the cloud, and then maybe I can also query for other nodes in this same resource group or whatever. And in my head, I'm like, that just sucks, right? Like it's not it's not proper config management, it's not proper infrastructure as code, it's fragile. And then the real problem is, how do I go convince, I don't know, 5,000 Fedora and Debian maintainers to do this for 35,000 software packages, right?
Right. Yeah, you don't.
Yeah, it's not gonna happen.
It just won't happen, right?
Happen. Yeah.
Oh man.
I was doing the math on programming libraries. You brought up npm. In any given distro, but especially in Debian and Ubuntu, you'll find a bunch of Python libraries. You'll find a bunch of Perl libraries.
Oh yeah.
That are you can install with apt-get and all of that. But Perl, which is again has been there for a while. I think only about like 9% of CPAN is packaged as a deb. Python, the number is lower. I don't know, it could be 5-4%. I forget. Node is like 0.5% or something like that. because who packages JavaScript libraries as devs and RPMs? Is the effort, just even the file size is going to be, just the metadata can be potentially just
Yeah.
more than just the library itself. And when you look at all the components, and if you go to libraries.io and you look at all the open source components out there, and then you go look at Debian, which is the distro that has the most packages,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about like 1% or less of all the open source software that's out there is packaged as a native dev or RPM package,
Right.
and that's not going to change. It's just not going to change.
I know. You just made me think of something. There was a group at a company that had a big cloud effort, HP, um, that was attempting to figure out effective ways to package for the native systems Node.js dependencies and stuff. It seemed mostly like an insurmountable problem, considering that it was simply the tool isn't built to do that. It's built to put everything into its little sandbox and pretend nothing else exists. So yeah, that's a fascinating world. Yeah, you just got my brain thinking about that though. I'm
And I
kind of
mean,
curious
and
what
there are
happened to their
things.
efforts.
One of my colleagues just got in this discussion on Twitter about snaps, and someone saying like, oh, you can snap install .NET Core or something like that, and you just get .NET Core, and you try to do the app route. There's like 6 commands you need to run. Which it was only one command. Yes, but also it's like Snap is taking care of 6 different problems for you that include, figuring out the origin. Where am I going to go fetch the software in Snap? There's like just the Snap store,
Mm-hmm.
and the dependencies, they don't have that problem. Everything's baked into the archive,
Right.
and how we're going to upgrade or keep that upgrade. Don't worry about that. We'll push the changes. Whereas the other thing is it's just separation of duties. These things are split in different commands and all of that. Uh, but yeah, there's a group of packaging formats and systems that are looking at this problem and saying, well, let's just put all the dependencies in, and instead of shipping, granular 450K that packages,
Mm-hmm.
like OpenOffice is a great example. In Debian and Ubuntu, you're gonna get
Oh yeah.
150 packages, including the Hungarian dictionary and that type of stuff. If there's a vulnerability in the, I don't know, the whatever uh, algebra something for the spreadsheet,
Right.
um, and that needs to get patched. You're gonna get that
Oh
450K
yeah.
patch. You're not gonna get the new version of the Hungarian dictionary,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
and that's something you can do with current packaging systems, but you can't do with some of these other kind of all in one formats. However, one thing I would like to see is I really want npm pip. Um, the Java things, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
blanking Maven and all of that stuff to,
Yeah.
to thrive. But I want that to be managed by apt in a way, or Jump, or
Mm-hmm.
RPM in a way. I want them to tell. I want a report of a system that tells me, here's all the packages like
Right.
RPM-QA or DPKG-L. Here's all the packages that I know of, and here's all the packages that npm knows of, and here's all the packages that pip knows of, and here's all the packages Nix knows of, and all this stuff. And then here's a bunch of files that are not accounted for, and
Mm-hmm.
here's their checksums. And by the way, npm here is version whatever, and that's a vulnerable version, and you need a new version of npm or something like that, because otherwise we're relying on the self-policing of the developer.
Yeah.
Saying, well, I use npm for everything, but I don't really care much about npm the binary itself, unless
Right.
unless it starts giving me messages that, hey, I'm old, update me or something like that. So coexistence is going to be a reality. I just don't think any distros right now have been designed around um, convergence
Yeah.
of this and coexistence of these things. Because yes, every distro is pulling in their own direction,
Mm-hmm.
interesting directions, but Ubuntu has snaps. I think that it's been now over a year that Snapd ships with Ubuntu. Fedora has
Yeah.
Silverblue with Flatpaks and immutable kind of base images and Flatpak and all the OS3 support and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Nixos for Nix, you have GixZ for Gix, but everyone's kind of pulling in different directions.
Yeah. It's I don't know. I kind of like that. I like different directions
Of course,
because you can pick
yeah.
one and then versus one direction.
or two, which is yeah, yeah, or the Apton RPM kind of distro war, reality of 10 years ago,
Yeah.
and well, I guess still if you go on Reddit and a couple other places, there's still distro wars and stuff going on. But think of desktop
It's,
application, right? We were talking about desktop. How
yeah.
do you distribute games? And I'm not talking about like Super Tux Kart and the GNOME Solitaire games. I'm talking about like Steam, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do you distribute that stuff? And so, well, in that case, I think they have their own Linux distro, and they'll
Yeah.
probably come up with their own ideas for that. Flatpak, actually, interestingly enough, has a lot of uh, there's I think it's called Wine Pack.
Hmm.
It's like a wine and Flatpak, hybrid to better distribute Windows games that are
Huh.
emulated on Linux with Wine. And again, just on desktop, I think we can find a lot of. OBS is another great example. Like
Hmm.
it's a complex application.
Yeah.
You can install it. You probably install it like from the Ubuntu PPAs or something like that.
I I didn't
Oh, you build it.
because I had to build and hack some of the plugins
Yeah.
um, on Linux, but the default install worked for 90% of the stuff. But because I set up a dev environment, mine's weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, the first time I installed it, I did. I just went from the PPA.
Yeah. So yeah, that's another example, and I think actually Snaps and Flatpaks are close to having a good solution for that.
Hmm.
For desktop application distribution, games, and that type of stuff. But then there's a problem. If you look at their stores, and if the stores only look like they're shipping one kind of software, will that kind of be the only kind of software that will ever ship there? If you're an ISV, you're probably going to be picking ecosystems that way. And now we're starting to sound a lot like not what open source is about. And
Right.
yeah,
Awesome. Um, Last question for the stream. Uh, if you had a wish that would be granted in all the systems and all the futures of Linux and whatnot, what would be the single thing you'd wish for?
I think that idea of accounting for software
Mm-hmm.
is an operating system responsibility. It's not an external observer like a config manager or like a scanner or monitor or something like that. I think the distro package managers need to take accountability for software that someone built and installed and it's somewhere in the system. And it feels like the basics of that, like the I notify mechanisms to see when a new file is put in the file system and that type of stuff. It seems like that's precarious right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like that very basic, like who put this file here that is a binary and it's whatever executable and what's the checksum, where did it come from, that stuff. Um, because interestingly enough, I don't think, and I'm going to use Debian as an example. I run Debian. I've run it for years. I trust it, but I really don't know where the software came from because literally the way Debian works is that I build a source package on my AMD64 system.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a source package and then I have a binary AMD64 package, and I push those two things to the FTP master Debian kind of space. And historically, having to rebuild the source for AMD64 or whatever the mainstream architecture was at the time was expensive. So they took the binary and they put it in the repo immediately, just so I could start using it.
Mm-hmm.
And then if there was nothing wrong with that package, I got promoted to testing, and then eventually I got released and stable. So what effectively means is that if you're running Debian, you probably are running software that was built by individuals around the globe on their laptops.
Yeah.
And having that origin, that traceability, like in my system, being able to say where did this software, where was it built and who built it and that stuff. I don't think the distros have fully taken kind of responsibility for telling me as a user that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have to resort to all sorts of, including proprietary software, people that are selling software for like, monitoring it. Here's an agent that's going to monitor your stuff, that starts sounding like AV products and all that kind of weird stuff. So, I would, instead of trying to solve all sort of other random problems, I would really like to see the operating system take accountability for provenance of the software that is installed there.
I like that wish. That's a good one. Kissy Fur, We don't actually know anything about computers and especially the prices, so can't really help you there on that question. Uh, we know about Linux,
Yes.
so and it's free. So that part we can say, use Linux. It's free, so you don't have to pay for it. But I don't know what computer to tell you to get. It's an operating system, kind of like Windows. Um,
I like Phil Shapiro's recommendations on Twitter. He's really good at tracking down eBay's, um, best
the best
value,
deals.
yeah, for old ThinkPads
Nice.
and the type of stuff. I had knee surgery like a year and a half ago, and I was like, well, I'm gonna spend a couple weeks in bed and all that stuff, and all I had was kind of like a work MacBook
Hmm.
and not a Windows machine or something like that. And yeah, service knocks and this type of stuff, but I wanted something I could have on my lap and all of that. And I reached out to him. He suggested just an old ThinkPad,
Yeah.
but it's absolutely great. I mean, it's compact, form factor, $300 or less, and it's
There you
great.
go.
So yeah,
That's the answer. What was who is it?
Phil Shapiro,
Phil
Phil Shapiro on
Shapiro
Twitter.
on
Yeah,
Twitter. Yeah.
search for good kind of ThinkPad deals on eBay, and it's always a
Yeah.
good
It's kind of fun to go
quick
shopping
wins.
that way too. It's you get to dig into all sorts of ranges of stuff. Um, awesome. So thanks for coming on.
Thanks for
Thanks for
having me.
coming way out here to Valhalla. It's been awesome. You are what's your Twitter?
Bureado, so Burriado. It's difficult to pronounce in English, but search my name. It's there on the stream. In Spanish is Burriado, so it kind of rolls off the tongue.
Yeah,
Not in English though.
Ariado. You have to
There's,
you have to start to roll some a bit, which is very difficult
I
in
guess,
English.
I'm teaching my daughter to roll. She speaks both, but she's more on the English side in terms of the rolling R's.
Yeah,
So she's like ra ra. I'm like no ra.
yeah. I
So
I get a lot of it because I work with people that speak Spanish, but also speak Russian, speak French, and there's different inflections of how to roll,
yes,
how many trills you need in it,
yes.
and I'm just like, okay, now I look like an idiot.
Yeah, we're not going full Italian here on the. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
not. Yeah, there's no need for that.
I kid you not. I was learning Italian, and somebody says, "Well, when you speak Italian, you have to do it like this, and you'll figure it out." And I was like, "Oh, that's pretty good." So awesome. Again, thanks for coming out,
Thank you.
and y'all know where to find me. I'm on the Twitters. I'm on the Twitch. I'm all over the place, Adrian. So check y'all later. I'll be back on this evening, and probably will be twitching some code at some point today. As long as I don't pass out. But I have coffee, so good luck to me. Anyway, y'all have fun. Cheerio.